Hey, it's Chris, Liege Games. Let's do this. Let's talk Witcher, Old World. Only got 3 days left on Kickstarter. I am doing a super deep dive. This is a long video, longer than I intended. But the reason I'm doing that is because I want to give you all of that information condensed into one video. I'm not splitting this up into an unboxing and a gameplay and a what you should know and should you back this and my opinion. I'm not doing that. This is all in one video. So let's talk Witcher Old World, right? Right? That's what I'm going to try and do. A few weeks ago, the designer reached out just randomly and said, hey, I like your stuff. I do a lot of Kickstarter campaign discussion. And so I was lucky enough to get sent a prototype copy. I'm probably the smallest channel to be able to have hands-on with this game. And for that, it's been a really good experience. So I'm hoping to be able to provide you with a unique, my take on things so far. So if you want to look in the description below, if you are interested in my thoughts in general, if you are interested in the gameplay, a little bit of a look at that, if you're interested in my thoughts on the campaign so far and my thoughts on what you should be backing, should you be backing, is this right for you? All of that is going to be timestamped below. So if you're interested in that, just click down below and you can skip right to that section. We got it. It's here. It's Witcher. Let's do this. So the song, the iconic song now from the Netflix series, toss a coin to your Witcher, oh valley of plenty, oh valley of plenty, oh. Might as well be describing what's going on Kickstarter, with Kickstarter being said valley of plenty. Because Kickstarter has become the dispensable cash cow for a lot in the hobby. And this game is a very unique take on things. And you've heard this elsewhere. You've seen these terms thrown around. Sort of a deck building, hand management, combo system, moving your little Witcher miniature around on the map, trying to vanquish foes in order to get the most trophies to end the game. And there has been a lot of critique. There has been a lot of criticisms. It's been very interesting because I've also been subscribed to the Board Game Geek page and seen all of these threads pop up. What do you need to know first and foremost about this game? This game is not for everybody. I'll flat out put that out there right now. This is a very, people talk about it being generic. People talk about it being, well, if this was any other IP, that it would not be raising as much money. And yes, you're right. If this was some other generic IP, it wouldn't be raising as much money. But that's like saying if Netflix made The Witcher show and made it completely about an unknown monster slaying thing, it wouldn't be getting the stars. It wouldn't be raking in the eyes. It wouldn't get a season 2. Well, yeah, that's right. But that's also the point, is that some of that is the love of the IP. And for better or for worse, you can't separate the two at this point. So you take it for what it is. So if that's your big criticism, this game isn't for you. If you're looking for a purely strategic game, this game is not for you, period. Already, I will tell you that. Before we get into the gameplay, before we get into the mechanics, before we get into anything else of depth, if you're watching this and you get to this point and you say, I don't want luck, I don't want randomization, I don't want random pulls, I don't want anything in that ilk, this game, cancel your pledge right now. If you don't like random chaos, story events, getting the bad pull, choosing the wrong coin flip, essentially, in some of these battles, if you don't like rolling dice, if dice poker sounds awful to you, get out now. You shouldn't be spending the money on this. I don't care how pretty the miniatures are. I don't care how innovative some of these systems are. This game is not for you. You need to avoid those things. Now, if any of those things that I have mentioned already sound okay, well then let's talk a little bit more. Let me show you some of the gameplay from my own prototype copy, the one I just lifted up here, the one I have literally sitting right here with the board. Let's take a look at this. I can show you a little bit of some examples of the gameplay. There's enough other walkthrough out there, but I know that you guys probably don't want to watch me play solo for 57 minutes or 1,063 hours. That is not going to be of interest, but what you need to know is how some of these mechanics work, some highlights, some lowlights, some concerns, and also how they are addressing the concerns, because let's also be clear, this Kickstarter campaign has been one of the most reactive that I have seen, period. Second only to maybe the other only one that I can think of is Age of Atlantis, where the designer, the company that is doing the game, is actively responding to backer wishes. Now, again, there are many vocal people out there saying that it is not responding enough one way or the other. I won't get into that, but I will talk about what is out so far into the campaign and how you should be looking at it so far. But let's look at some of the gameplay highlights so that you can get a better sense. In a nutshell, I am going to give you the Cliff Notes version. If you are old enough to know the reference of Cliff Notes, I am going to give you the Cliff Notes version. And if you are old enough to get that reference, I'm giving you the synopsis of what you need to know to get a most informed decision. I am not here to sell you. I am not here to pander to you, to sell this game to you. I want you to like this game for what it is, not what it could be, not what you think it should be, but what it is in the essence of what it is going to be, period. Because the goal of a game like this, the goal of a video like this is not to, I'm not trying to push you one way or the other, right? My goal is to give you the most informed opinion that I can so that you can make the best decision for you on this game, period. And if you're okay with that, well, let's watch some more. If you want me to sell you one way or the other, well, I'll give you the pros, I'll give you the cons, but I'm also not going to tell you what to do. You need to spend your own money because you need to be okay with it. So let's take a look at some of the gameplay and we'll go further. So here's the basic setup for The Witcher, the board game. I have placed randomly 3 heroes onto 3 starting schools. I've randomly placed 3 level 1 monsters out on different areas, different terrain types. And then I've also correspondingly put the token, the clue token that is corresponding to the area they're on right in front of them for easy reference here. I've moved the potion card pile onto the main board here so you can see it a little bit easier, as well as the event, both the in-city events as well as the outside of city events, so you can just, you know, kind of have them all grouped together here. At the top, just slightly out of view, is the quest pile as well as the monster deck pile. I mean, those aren't going to be really mainly the focus right now, so we'll just put them off to the side. Over here on this side, you can see the market, where the market cost in these cards is indicated in the lower right hand corner, and then you can see as they go across and you get to this end of the market down here, you get -1. And I know it's a little hard to see, but then these cards themselves, you can see right here the cost in the lower right hand corner, the symbol in which the terrain that they allow you to travel to in the lower left hand corner, those little purple and red marks on the side of the card you can see are the combo abilities, and then the upper left hand corner tells you sort of what it's doing, and this is adding you 2 shields into that combo. So there are various, combinations thereof. You have the little marks, for example, from this yellow one. You have the marks here in the upper left-hand corner of this one. Tells you it does 2 attack damage when you're fighting the monster. Also, you draw 2 extra cards on the turn after you're refilling your hand. That's going to be added to your combat value. So, I mean, all of these things have a meaning. And so you can start to strategize when you're actually fighting. But, I mean, that's the fighting. We're skipping to that right now. Let's take it back a step so you can see what the actual gameplay is like. Okay, we've changed the lighting around now here for a second so you can see a little bit better so my shadows aren't overwhelming things. But this is my starting hand, if you will. You can see a little bit of what that entails. I'm not going to show you, I'm not going to splay out all of these cards, it's a little bit too much. So I'm giving you sort of the top-down view. We'll move a little bit closer when we start to actually play, but you can see the board setup. And then in the lower left-hand corner here, way down here, you can sort of see the trophies. And so that is where you're going to be marking your trophy achievements and what you're going to be earning when you defeat a monster or when you meditate when you have a stat at level 5. Speaking of that, so this, for example, is what one of the boards looks like. It has a little bit of an inlay, as you can see with this angle provided here. But then the main difference in these is this column right here. This is your special ability column. So the main 3 columns here are all the same. Then this is keeping track of your level. This is keeping track of your shields. And so this is your special ability. This tells you, the iconography tells you what you get at each level of that special ability. And the symbology is okay. It's definitely something you have to learn, and it's definitely something the first, half of the first game it will take you to learn, but it's nothing overwhelming. The other nice thing is it tells you right alongside here, as the Witcher from this school, it also gives you a nice synopsis there of what speed actually does. So what does speed do? Before your first fight turn, you look at the number of cards on the top of your deck indicated by your attribute level, draw the indicated number, and put the rest on the top of your deck. So that is what it's referring to on the right side here of how many numbers you're going to be drawing. So all of these right here will have a little number next to them For the first level, it's look at 1 card, put 1 in your hand. Look at 3 cards, put 1 in your hand. Look at 3 cards, put 2 in your hand. You know, and so on and so forth. And all of those, you know, there's one with shields, for example. And that is another clan or school that the Witcher gets the special ability from. And so it's just manipulating that and how you're going to be changing that around. So here is the starting deck zoomed in so you can see a little bit more. You just basic attacks, basic 1-level combos for the most part, basic shields, nothing spectacular when it comes to that when you're looking at it. So all relatively straightforward cards. And you'll notice as you start thumbing through these cards, whether it's the ones from your deck that you start off with, or the cards that are from the market, is that the certain colors obviously have certain themes to them in terms of what they're going to be doing, or certain cards comboing with certain other color cards, for example. So, again, something to be aware of. So at the beginning, I'm going to have these 3 cards in my hand. So I'll display them this way. So what I have here is I have 1 of each symbol, and then I have a +1 here, an attack, and attack. Well, right now, unless I'm going up against a monster, unless I am taking my Witcher, and I am moving this guy to an area that has one of said monsters, level 1 monsters, the guy in the mountain here, I'm not really worried about that right now. Now, could I do that? Yeah. Do I want to use this action that gets me a potion? Yeah, I potentially might, because potions are also valuable. But, you know, I have a lot of different options when I'm in the middle here. So we'll pan over here a little bit so you can see a little bit more of the map. Now, I will say with the map, the roads are a little confusing. I think that was one thing I would definitely not mind cleared up on. Now, obviously, I mean, you can just trace the routes, right? Okay, it goes that way. But wouldn't it be nice just to have something a little bit more like that? And I know you're trying to play to the terrain as well, but it can be just slightly a little bit misleading sometimes about what leads to what or what doesn't lead to what. So it's a minor thing. But if you're looking at where you can go, obviously, okay, look, I can go to the mountain here. You can't stay there and do the action there. You can go back to it after leaving even on the same turn, but you cannot just stay there on the beginning of your turn and do the action there. You have to move someplace. So I could realistically go to either one of these waters. I could go to the forest. I could go to the mountain over here, the mountain over here. So this is a great spot to be starting at. I think that also belays the point. If I am this Witcher school starting right here, I have quite the options of starting. Whereas, you know, if you're up here in the corner where you can't see, you know, way up here out of camera sight, or if you're way down here out of camera sight down here, there are only 3 locations down here. There are only 3 locations up here, but you're also not quite as open in terms of what you can do. And so that may lead to a little bit of a starting advantage. And that's why I think some of those randomization tiles might be more important, but also just the map itself becoming underrated and how important it is as well. When you're not fighting though, when I'm looking at my cards right here, I am going to be wanting to play all of these cards to utilize all of these actions. So there is a little bit, not really action programming in that sense, but terms of strategy of the order in which I'm going to. So it might not matter to me which mountain I want to use right now to go towards the monster and get the ability there with the potion, or go to the other mountain over here because it's also a potion. But what might matter is the second move beyond that in terms of one of these with the forest or the water. Do I want to get a clue to fight one of these monsters? We'll talk about what that means in a second in case you're not aware. Or am I just worried about going around and getting my stats leveled up? And honestly, at the beginning of the game, you're worried about getting your stats leveled up because those stats are going to have a direct ramification on the cards that you're going to be getting, on the amount of cards you're going to be getting, just, you know, your prowess overall. And the trickiest part when we found playing this game is when do you stop leveling those up and when do you start fighting said monsters in the first place? Small side note, they do label the tokens 1, 2, 3 on the back, so you don't have to guess which ones are 1, which ones are 2, which ones are 3, because sometimes the pictures are very similar between the tokens themselves. So, okay, let's say I go over here, I grab a potion, no big deal. Boom, I get my potion. My potion says discard any 1 card from your hand to immediately deal 2 damage, which is okay. It's a starting potion. It's a very generic potion. It is what it is. So now I've got 2 cards left in my hand. I have a water and I have a forest. Now this is where I could potentially just go back, because I have a forest. I could go back to my starting school. And if this was my starting school, then I could level up my special. And I could level up whatever one was that for me. So I could do that, but now it's going to cost me gold. Leveling up these stats at these multi ones is going to cost you gold. There are other ones where it is not going to cost you gold, but you can't do it as freely. So then maybe I want to go to the water first and I want to play some dice poker, or I want to go here and then I want to go play some dice poker, because after I've gone here, because it cost me 2 gold to level up one of my stats, then I'm going to play my last card, go down here and do dice poker. Dice poker is literally just that. You're rolling dice and you're playing it as a 5-card poker hand where you get 1 reroll or redraw, essentially. And that's it. You play against either another Witcher that's there, or you play against just the local townies, if you will. And so if you're playing against the local townies, they pony up 2 gold so that, there's not just your gold going up, but you also have to have a gold to wager. So, and then you're just rolling. Okay, great. That's the worst possible thing I could get. And so maybe I keep the 4s and the 6s, and I'm going to roll again. And there you go. I got, actually 2 pair. So then you go up against the black dice, and whoever wins gets the money. If the black dice were to beat me at this point, then the money would just all go into the bank. So dice poker, very straightforward, but I know a lot of people are just not going to like this because there's a lot of chance involved on this side of things. And if you don't like that, you have the potential to lose money, as well as just be negated in terms of what you want to do on future turns because of your lack of funds. So, but let's say I went through and I did the dice poker. Let's say I won. Let's say I, won a gold there, and then I went back over here for the sake of continuity, and then I leveled up the stat. So I'm out of cards. I've played all 3 of my cards. I have no cards in my hand. I now have a new potion that I could be using in the future. So then I have my option. Am I going to explore to the outside or the inside of the city? And then you draw one of these cards and you take it and pass it to the person on your right. They read this super long narrative that's on there. You can see again, without text spoiling it, it's not short. There's a top and a bottom, and there's ramifications and consequences. Now, for this one example, I will give you the Cliff Notes version. Okay, if I do A, I'm going to get a potion. If I do B, I lose 2 gold, but then I get a quest. Now, if you enter the quest, most of the time then, you have to proceed somewhere else. And sometimes that is a named location, like a certain city on the map, or it is just a generic location, like in this case, it actually says, just go to a forest. So that is then what I would have to do. And when you get to forest, then this thing just sits in front of you, and then that person, it says, reads quest number XX, whatever. So then you're going to resolve the quest. And like I've seen, some of these quests are positive, some of these are negative. So it's tricky to tell sort of what are the ramifications of your actions in the first place. So then at the end of my turn, I have the rest of my 7-card deck that is still there. And this is the difference in this game. And this is the very unusual thing that it takes a little bit to get used to. And we kind of messed up the first couple times, is I take and I draw 3 of these cards at the end of your turn. And you take these cards and you go, okay, if I then, at the very end of my turn, want to buy from the market, which actually I have to buy at the market, you can see here a little bit of where the market is. And these cards that I mentioned at the beginning, they range from either costing +1 to -1 of the cost that's in the lower right-hand corner. And I have 3 cards, and it's not the cost or the value of the cards, it's how many cards you are discarding, because this card number that you just drew is not only your cards that you have to buy from here, it's the cards that are going to be starting your hand at the next turn. And that is where it's going to drive people crazy as well, because this is not a mechanism that I have really seen a lot in practice in other games. And honestly, I screwed this up a couple times the first game that I played, and I really significantly impacted what I wanted to do on my next turn because I just didn't have the cards. Because you can see all of the cards out here, the highest cost is 2. Now, if this one was down here, for example, it would be 3. And to get that, I would have to put all of these cards along with the other 3 cards I just played this turn. And then this sole card would be the card in my hand, and I would be limited to just do this. Now, if I was just needing to go fight a monster, this might not be a bad strategy, because when you fight a monster, all of your discard and your pile all get shuffled together before the battle. But then I'm not also going to be able to do anything else on that turn. I couldn't level up before that turn. I couldn't go grab an extra potion because I wouldn't have any other cards to go any other place before I would fight that monster. So, positive, negative. And you can see that some of these are 0 cost, like my starting cards. And so I could have just grabbed this instead if I didn't grab this one. And then I could have had my starting hand of 4 at the beginning of my next turn. That's a big difference between starting and only having potentially 1 action next turn and 4 actions. And so you can see that's where some of that decision making is going to come in. Now let's talk about the monster battles for a second. Let's skip over to that for a minute. Let's say I do go over here and I battle this guy. So this is where he is in the mountain. If I had one of these clues, if I had gone to one of the other areas on the map, and then I had gotten this, when you get one of these clues, you put it down in front of you, you put a gold on it, and when you get to that area, so actually this happens to be number 11, which is right where the monster is, so I would then get the clue, I would get the gold, so it's another way to earn some gold, and now I would flip it over, because then I could use this when I'm fighting the monster that's on this terrain to get the advantage, because I have hunted him and tracked down information in terms of helping my success with the hunt in the first place, thematically speaking, and now I would go first in combat. Which, again, I will talk about this more later, but going first sometimes is a big deal. I have found that other times, sometimes you can just go in there and slog it out, and depending on you like that, that makes it sometimes less important, at least at the lower levels sometimes. So what you do then is, this is this guy right here. So this is the Nest of Ghouls. The Nest of Ghouls, you'll see, has a value of 10. I know it's hard to read, but we'll check it. Believe me on that. So this is the Nest of Ghouls that we're fighting. During the player's first turn only, the monster may discard up to 2 cards regardless of how much damage is dealt by the player. And you'll see that it's 10 value. So what does that 10 mean when we put it out here? So that means that you take this deck, this monster deck that they have, and this is the modifications that the Kickstarter is doing, hopefully going to be giving some variation in the Kickstarter, some different levels of the same monsters, some variation therein, because otherwise right now, in the prototype that we have, it is 20 cards. And so you just take half of them. I just take 10 of them, and that is the monster's life force. And so if the monster goes first, then you just flip it over. I choose one. It's either the player takes 3 damage, or the player lowers their alchemy level by 1 and takes damage according to the monster level. And if it's a level 1, it would take 1 damage, 2 damage, and 3 damage. So not a terribly bad card, but then the player would go. The player, in this case, I'm taking my whole deck, including that card I just got last round, potentially, shuffling them all together from my discard pile that I've already played previously, back into my draw pile, shuffle them up, and then you draw per your combat. So my combat in this sense at the beginning is 3. If my combat was 4, I'd draw 4, and that's where that speed thing that I mentioned earlier comes into play. So if my speed was level 2, I would be drawing extra cards beyond my combat on the first turn. And now the monster's special ability in the sense is, okay, I draw these cards. I've got cards right here that don't combo at all. So that's horrible, actually. And that's why you don't go fight a monster early. Because if I had to lay cards around right now, I could lay this one, which gets me +3 cards drawn next time instead of just my usual combat. So I would draw 6 cards from my deck. My hand would be huge, although there is a hand size limit, so you need to be aware of that too. Or each of these cards, none of them have the little side thing allowing me to combo, so I can only play 1 card then without the combo, so I'm only going to deal 1 damage. Let's say, though, I just took a couple of these cards from the side. Let's say, though, that this was my starting hand. And let's say that I could combo all of these. Now, I probably wouldn't want to because I'm not forced to. This one is going to give me 2 shields back. It allows me to play this purple color. It allows me to play this. And I could potentially do 4 damage plus 2 shields gained back. And I would have to draw 1 less card on my combat for the next round of combat. But if I played this on the first one, it would be negated because if I did, the monster's ability says that it can't be damaged for more than 2 in the first time. And that plays into the monster deck that I just had. Because when you do damage to the monster deck, you have all of these cards. You just go, okay, well, here's the card I played, and then, 2 damage, discard 2. This is the deck that he has left. Flip over the next card. The next player picks which one they want. They choose either charge or bite, and then so on and so forth. Player takes the next battle, they do 2 damage, I discard 2 more, then they take their next attack, and if I make them run out of cards that they're drawing and that are in their hand, then the monster wins. But if I play this one, they're not out, and then all of a sudden I only have 5 cards left, they do me 5 damage, boom, I'm done, I'm out, they win. Now, if there is a certain amount left, even if the player is defeated, like 0 or 1, because it can happen on the very last card, can knock the player out, but I don't have any other cards, so you get, compensated for that, a falling forward, if you will, but you do not get the full benefit, the full trophy, the full positive from being able to do that as well. So something you need to really be aware of, because it is falling forward in a sense, but it is also falling backwards, because if you can't get the trophy, it really does help you, because also you flip over these trophies. And why do trophies matter? Trophies matter because, like I said, these all have a special ability at the bottom. The Nest of Ghouls here has a special ability that you get then, and it says if you end your turn on a water location, draw a potion, right? That changes things a little bit. Now I'm going to try and end because those potions matter. Now, I didn't talk about potions. I could have, if I wanted to, on that first hand that I showed you, played that potion that I drawn earlier. And that potion allowed me just to discard one of those cards and draw 2 damage, as opposed to the 1 damage that all of those cards were doing. And you can have up to 4 potions at any one point in your possession, but you can only play the number of potions equal to your alchemy level. So that is where the limiting factor is, and that's why the alchemy level becomes more important, because these are basically like one-offs that you can just spam, potentially, and they become very useful, especially at the higher levels in these situations. What else do you need to know? I mean, this is a thick deck of the events, the indoor and the outdoor events. Let me be very clear. Very thick deck, a lot of text going on. I have no concerns about it from that standpoint. Potions are potions. They've got the bombs. We'll talk about those in a minute after the wrap-up, after this gameplay session. So I'll give you more thoughts on those. What else do you need to know? Now, the trophy. Down here, the trophying. So when you level up, this is the equalizer, because the concern being, okay, if I get a couple of these level 1s with that ability that gives me an extra potion at the water, and then during my fight, during your turn, if you have 0 cards in your deck, raise your shield by 1 in this case. I mean, those are sort of concerns if you are not the first person to get one of those, or if you are the third person in the game and the other 2 people already have one of these. So how do you mitigate that? Well, what happens is when you get a trophy, when you are moving your marker, your Witcher, from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3, you are taking what is known as fatigue after these battles. And that is sort of the great equalizer. And I say sort of because what it happens with that is you have to choose 1 card at the first level. Subsequently, you take more fatigue at each level, and you have to trash them. Not discard them and put them in your discard pile so you can't draw them next time, but discard them in the sense that you are getting rid of them from the game completely. They are never again available from your deck. And so that is where sometimes a little bit of the decision making becomes a little bit harder, because you're also trying to keep your deck lean, like I mentioned, to be able to find and strike that balance between when am I going and fighting these monsters without, as you saw in that first hand, having no combinations and the inability to do more than 1 or 2 damage a turn, because then you are going to get wiped out when the monster is doing anywhere between 3 and 5 damage, but also not making your deck so massive that 1, you're not able to draw the cards you need, or 2, you've made it so massive and you've bought so many things that people are in front of you and already have a couple trophies, and it is sort of a runaway leader then. Not because the game is in balance, but because you focused on the stat side of things and the deck side of things rather than what was going on the map and monster side of things. That is the striking balance you need to take in this game. And the first game or 2, that balance is very tricky, no lie. This is the basic gist of this game. You're rinsing and repeating, moving around the map, doing these actions, taking these events, picking the random, and it is random, let's be honest, consequences of your actions in the outdoor or in the city, and then you're dealing with it in terms of what you want to buy, how you want to combo, and that's where, the deck building comes in, is you definitely need to be aware, and we weren't the first game or 2 we played, of how these combo in terms of, okay, yellow is with green a lot. Okay, purple is with green a lot. Or green sometimes has purple and the maroon on it. How aware of that are you, as opposed to just maybe going and saying, oh, this is 3 damage. Let's just grab a lot of these 3 damagers. Well, it doesn't combo with anything. So, I mean, it's great to have a couple of these, but okay, all of a sudden, maybe I can do this and I can get, 3 damage and 2 shields back. Or am I going to want to just be able to draw more with all of the yellow cards so I can stack up my hand so I can get that combo and make that 5-chain combo of multiple layers? So now that we've talked about that, now that we've looked at just a sample round-ish, let's go to my final thoughts. So now that you've seen some of the highlights, some of the lowlights, let me tell you my impressions. Now, this game had a little bit more of a learning curve than I was expecting, I won't lie. But the rulebook, tentatively that's out there was better than I was expecting. It was not one of the harder rulebooks I've read recently. I've read some harder rulebooks. This is not one of the harder ones, but there are still, points here and there. And I think the things I have not seen the co-op. I have not seen the solo. So I can't speak to that. I only have the competitive. My first impression, my game group's first impression of this game was, honestly, in the first playthrough, we were going really slow. It was a slog, I won't lie. It was a slog. That's the thing that some of these other videos may not show you. Like, the learning curve is there. Like, you're trying to figure out, okay, especially when you're trying to figure out whether or not you have enough cards of these combo cards to fight a monster. Like, I don't have a clue. Like, how is my first battle going to go? And, the other thing with the battles, I mean, this is the first pro-con of the battles. I mean, once you get into the battles of looking through these cards, taking your combos, aligning all the different colors, and taking a view of that, I mean, the battle goes relatively quickly. I play my combo, they flip over their cards, they play their card, I flip out my cards, I play my cards to attack, they take their damage. I mean, it's relatively very quick back and forth. So the battles, I know a lot of people were concerned on the forums, the battles are not that long. But when do I go to the battle? Do I have enough of these? It's very, very hard to discern that. Because at the end of your turn, you're at most going to have like 4 cards in your hand, and then you're trying to go, okay, what cards do I have in my hand that I'm going to be using down to play on the field? But what cards am I going to have in my deck? I'm shuffling them all together before the battle, but is it going to be enough? And sometimes the luck of the draw is bad, and sometimes you just choose the wrong thing, bite versus charge. I mean, I remember plenty of battles where I was the person choosing for the monster, and I chose all of the easy stuff, so the person I'm playing against is getting this super easy battle, and then all of a sudden they throw out this 7 or 8 attack combo, and the monster's level 2 is dead in like 2 turns, right? And there are other battles where you're just going to choose the wrong thing and you're going to get slammed. Your attributes are going to get knocked down. You're going to lose a bunch of health because you pull the 5 attack card against you and you're just SOL. Same thing with the dice poker. I'll put that out there for the dice poker. I beat someone in the dice poker like 3 times in a row to start the game. And they were losing gold because gold is a relatively tight economy in this game. Because it is so valuable, because you can level up your attributes with it, and because it is used in almost everything, and it is not as loosey-goosey as you may think in some of the other scenarios. This is not you get whatever you want to get and you just kind of have to do it faster than everyone else. No, this is you are going to have to manage that side of things because it is going to have a direct relationship. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you don't mind that chaos, like I mentioned earlier, if you like the ability to have to look up what poker tables were, because you can't remember if a straight beats a full house or not. I mean, I know. I knew it, but we had to look it up to confirm it. But that is the sort of thing that you're just going to have to look up and know, after a while. And again, the battle system is unique. You hear people complaining all the time about, I don't want dice in my battle. I don't want dice in my battle. I don't want dice in my battle. You don't have dice in your battle. Your hand and how you use your hand is the optimization. How you want to use those potions. How you want to talk and use about those bombs that they are including that I do not have copies of, so I don't know how those are going to interact and whether that's going to shift the dynamic one way or the other. They are important. I mean, I thought potions were completely superfluous the first couple rounds that we played, and then all of a sudden, when I got into a tough battle, I realized that, again, potions are not things that you hold on to that you treat like your board game collection. Potions are things that are meant to be used right away, played right away, and not stored, collected, or put on a shelf to collect dust. They're that big of make it or break it, especially at the beginning of the game when you're unsure, like I mentioned before, of whether or not you're going to be able to beat that level 1 monster when you're starting out. And then, once the momentum gets rolling, once you realize, okay, this is how much wiggle room I had on this level 1 monster, well, maybe I can fight another level 1 monster, maybe I can fight a level 2 monster if I get a couple more cards. But I can't get a couple more cards because I have to level up my attributes because I can't get enough combat cards drawn in the first place to beat the level 2 monster. And each of the level monsters has an ability. When you beat them, you get their trophy ability. I also thought it was going to be very easy to get my attributes up. I thought it was going to be one of those games where the attributes get up and everyone becomes Super Saiyans, and then it becomes more of who can get to the monster first. No, I mean, it's hard, they say, to get the trophies of those attributes when you meditate at level 5. It takes a lot of work to get anything to level 5. It takes a lot of gold, it takes a lot of specificity to go after that, and you almost have to selectively do that and not go after monsters. And again, that leads to the branching how you want to play the game. Now, obviously, again, they mitigate it because you cannot win by just meditating. You have to do a la Witcher. You cannot just, be zen, be monk-like, and be a pacifist. You have to go out and kill a monster to win the game. That leads me into my next point. This game is, especially the first time or two you play it, this is not going to be a short game. I mean, we played the first game as a learning game to 3 trophies, right? And it took us almost 3 hours. Now, granted, I'm not a very good rules explanation, and the rulebook is still in very much, beta standpoint, and we had a few questions that we'd answer along the way, and some of the things I messed up, and, I take a lot of blame for that. And definitely the second half, or maybe the last third of the game, was much, much quicker. Because we finally understood the nuances of the battles moving around, the turn flowed very quickly. So once you know what you're doing, the learning curve is relatively easy, but it's the learning curve initially that's more of the hard part. And how turn off is that for you? And I've heard a lot of complaints about it being too simple. Believe me, the base game of this is not too simple. Now, again, if you've watched my channel at all, if you haven't, well, I don't play deep Euro strategy games. So this sort of chaotic take that-ish, fighting things, rolling, card mitigation, this is up my alley. This is not the most complex I have played. This is by far and away not anywhere near the simplest. Again, the learning curve, once you're in, it's great. It flows well. But the decision-making still feels impactful. Now, granted, some of the decision-making is relatively minor. Like, you're moving these cards around. You have these cards with a little location symbol at the bottom, and you're trying to choosing which one you want. You can go back and forth, and you can do multiple actions in multiple places, multiple times in a turn, and that's fine. But I guess what I'm trying to say is if you're concerned that this is going to be too simple, either you're playing things at the very deep, heavy end of things, unless you are looking and you are playing something in the very heavy end of things, the very heavy strategic, well, I'm not sure this game is going to be for you, period, because it doesn't fit that style. But with the expansions, adding more depth, adding more gameplay, adding more nuance, again, don't take that as an either or. Well, if the expansions are adding more depth, that means the base game is not deep. No, it's adding another layer. You can add another layer and still be deeper in the first place. Now, again, it's not super strategic, it's very tactical. And if you don't like tactical, again, you're not going to like this game. If you don't like trying to combo these cards, because sometimes your cards in your hand are not going to be what you want. Sometimes the cards on the field are not going to be the ones that you want to buy. Sometimes you're going to have to mitigate it in those ways. And if you don't like imperfect information or the ability for other people to mess with your plans or steal a monster out from under you, again, stay away. Don't get me wrong, though. I mean, I'm not saying this game is perfect. I'm not saying this game is like Hyperspace Kraken level of awesomeness. I think a lot of it depends on the execution at the final product. And I think a lot of it is being addressed currently, and that's where I give them a lot of kudos. Now, I will say, I'm always a little hesitant with these campaigns where you are saying, okay, I'm going to be cooperative, I'm going to be competitive, I'm going to be solo, because what I fear in a game like this is one of these modes is going to be pretty good, like the competitive, right? But one or two of them are going to be half-baked. And I don't mean that in an offensive way. I mean that in just the sense that you only have so many resources and so much allocation of those resources for an end product, and sometimes the balance just cannot be achieved there. So part of me wishes that they were not as reflective in terms of the backers' responses, because I think you also have to stay true to the vision of the project. But I think they've also done probably the best job I've seen in responsiveness to backers' concerns in the first place. Now, I'm not saying, again, they're perfect, but I'm saying that a lot of the concerns that were initially raised with some of the actual components of the game, the gameplay mechanisms, have been addressed. I have here sort of the enemy deck, right? The AI, deck that you're pulling from and that you're choosing from. And the concern was that they're not varied enough. And believe me, I echo that. Having played through this, a lot of these are similar. Okay, 5 damage, 3 damage, 3 damage, 5 damage, 2 damage, take a damage according to the monster level. Some of them are not, all things being equal. I mean, if you just get a bad pull or a good pull, that can really make or break the monster battle more than what you do. And so the fact that they're adding more of these, the fact that you're considering adding some unique ones for each of the monsters, that would be very much a plus side without adding a whole lot of overhead. Because that's also the other thing that I get worried about when you take into account all of these things that are not initially part of the game in the first place. Like, if you were going to make a unique deck for every single one of these, I would worry about the balance. I would worry about just how things are going. I sort of like the way Aeon's End does it, right? Where Aeon's End has a few that are here that are the personal ones, and then a few supply that are just general. And so that would not be a bad way to go with this game in the first place. The other main criticism that people had, and talking about the event cards, you have the in the city event cards and the out of city event cards. And so, people were like, well, if I read these and, I play this through enough, there's not going to be enough variability. Okay, so let me show you some of these cards, right? Look at the amount of text that is on this card right now. You can't read it, and that's purposeful, but there's a lot of text. There's a lot of text on a lot of these. So one, you got to have a pretty dang good memory to memorize all of these after one playthrough of them, because you're also, if you play it like the way I didn't tell people the other response. So you don't know if the other response is better or worse, because there are some of these, don't get me wrong, there are some of these that it's good on both sides. There are some that it's not good on the other side, whether it's a quest that you get that has a bad quest result, because believe me, I had that, or a good quest and a good quest result, or just a good outcome versus a bad outcome. Sometimes you don't want to lose that gold to pay for whatever you're getting. I don't want to lose all my potions to get an attribute. I would rather have all 4 of my potions because I was just about to go into a battle next round. So it's that side of things. So it's not all just, rainbows, flowers, and sunshine on that side of things with these. And the fact that they're adding more of these with the stretch goals and the expansions, I mean, you're going to have plenty. Unless you're playing this game, ad nauseum, on repeat, you're going to have plenty. I'll tell you that right now. And if you can somehow remember all of them after like the 120 or 140 that there are, if you have that good of memory, well, I mean, it's clearly going to be an issue not just in this game, but in other games that have a lot less variability and a lot less number-wise than this. But that's cool. If you have that good of memory, more power to you. But it's not a concern from my standpoint. Because again, even if you read the card, if you don't know the other outcome, are you going to take the one that you know, or are you going to go for the unknown? So you get at least 2 times through all of these cards potentially, at least, so then you're doubling the number of really outcomes that you have in this, which again should mitigate any fears that you're not going to have enough in the first place. But again, it's the chaos factor. Do you like not having control of what you're going to do? Because some of these you can start to, after you've done like a dozen or 2 dozen of these, you can start to figure out a little bit of what they're going to lead to. Like, okay, I figure that this is going to have some sort of element that's going to go here, that I'm going to have to pay for something if I do this option potentially, or I'm going to have to gain something here, but sometimes you just can't. And again, is that going to frustrate you? Is that going to be something that you find amusing or enjoyable or not? If you can't predict a little bit of what the outcome is going to be. It's not like it gives you the option of, okay, go A and get 2 gold, or go B and pay 1 gold and get a crossbow. No, it's like, hey, here's this scenario. You have this choice. And one of those choices may get you one of those. One of those choices may get you choice B. One of them may get you choice C, D. You don't really know what direction, what reward, or what penalty you're going to get. And you don't know if that reward is actually going to be something that you wouldn't have rather had on the other side of things in the first place. So let's talk about the other elements of things. Like, let's talk about the schools of Witcher. Again, I should have led off with a video with this, but I have no background to the IP in the first place. I have no knowledge of it in more than just the peripheral video game series. I have no interest in or attachment to it like many of the other people who are more familiar with this, whether you're backers or other people reviewing this. So I'm going into this with a clean slate. My main concern when I look at the schools, and I think this was echoed, and they're trying to address this, trying to mitigate this, is that you have a static map right now, right? You do. And so I think one of the extras, one of the stretch goals is going to be the ability to change those spots in the map. And I think that becomes more important, because otherwise you could start having more of a strategic layout of your plan from the get-go. And again, if you like that, then you're probably not going to use that. But if you are truly trying to have a tactical experience, and you do not want to get into rote repetition, an algorithm of how you play the game, I think that is one of the most useful things to have in the game. My concern with the schools themselves is one, is that going to change the starting location of the schools, but also the school's abilities, the special abilities that you have as one of the witchers from said school. Because I worry, especially if they're adding like 1 or 2 as stretch goals, in addition to whatever's going on with the mages, I mean, I worry about it from a balance standpoint. How balanced are those abilities going to be? Because as small and superfluous as they seem at times, sometimes they are the make it or break it. When you can draw an extra card or 2 at the beginning as the cat, when you can add an extra shield once per round, it makes a difference. So I've covered a lot of stuff already, but let's go to the Kickstarter campaign page, because this goes into directly what you should be backing, what is of interest to you, what do you need to get, what should you avoid, what's of interest to you, what pledge level is right for you. So let's take a look at that real quick. Like, first off, full disclaimer here, like right now I'm backing at the deluxe level. Now, I don't know what I'm going to do. I mean, I'm not getting promised a copy, as I know of at least right now, but that is the pledge level I'm at. And now that is the big first distinction that I think you have to make when you're looking at this. Now, clearly there's a ton of eyes on this. So, I mean, there's going to be copies floating around the secondary market. You're going to be able to pick it up at retail, right? There's very few stuff on this page, and I give them a lot of kudos for that. There's not a lot of Kickstarter exclusives. There's not. But I'll tell you right now at the beginning, before I go any further down, before I look at anything else, if you have any interest in this game, if you think you are going to pick up this game, you should get it now. Because this right here, the Leader Games route, I will call it, the non-CMON, you are getting a package deal for all of these things. And I don't look at MSRP at all. MSRP is never what you're going to actually pay. For the most part, maybe some of you people overseas, yes, you may end up. So but either way, especially in those cases, then it's even more so. This is a better deal. You're getting these 3 things that are included in the base game. Especially if you're one of those people that already had those criticisms of, well, there's not enough in the first place. Well, now you're getting all of this stuff, and you can get it at either level. Now, again, you can argue the deluxe. Now, again, a lot of the time I will argue in Kickstarter campaigns, especially on the Euro side of things, that you should be getting the deluxe version. Otherwise, you pick it up at retail, because at retail it'll be a lesser price. Now, in this case, though, with all of this stuff that's included, it's not going to be a lesser price, because they're not going to include all of this stuff in the base game. Now, the base game itself might be less. It might be $30 or $40. Sure, whatever. Let's just assume that. But even if each one of these is only $20, that's $60. $60 plus $30, let alone even if it's $40, is more than this $86 right here. Now, yes, shipping, blah, 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 blah. But that's also assuming the very lowest end of all of these prices. And you're assuming a wide availability. If you don't make those broad-based assumptions, again, the price for either, and that is the rare thing, the price for either is probably better than you're going to pick up in the secondary market, whether the secondary market be another backer after the campaign ends or at a retail level. Especially if you're non-US, where things are often cheaper, whereas that is not the case in many other places. Whereas that is not the case in many other places, even like Canada, our next door neighbors to the north, or even overseas in Europe where this is coming from in the first place. So that is the first big point. Again, breaks down all of what you're getting. You're getting tons of stuff. That's not the issue. The only Kickstarter exclusive is these little miniature mounts, and then the other little standee guy that was, the add-on for if you didn't back in the first whatever how many hours. So that is breaking it down. It goes through all these miniatures. Again, I'm not a big miniature person when it comes to this. Like, I don't need the miniatures. So for me, again, that's where the price point is going to be. Do I need that stuff? What other deluxeifications, when you see all of these boxes, to scroll back up here a second, what other boxes are they really including? Scoring tokens, a tavern miniature. I don't need any of that. Monster miniatures. I mean, that's the one really, do I want monster miniatures versus monster guys? And yeah, I mean, the little hexes that were in this game were not terribly thematic, not terribly impressive. But if it saves me, $70, maybe you're talking my love language then in terms of money. So that's a consideration. And it breaks down all of this. And again, my biggest concern is how different is the co-op mode. I don't care about the solo mode, whatever. There's going to be more information on that. If you're going into this as a solo person, I would probably hesitate to do that at this point, just because if there's not a ton of information, you don't want a game that has a solo mode tacked on. And I'm not saying this is going to be that situation, but I would like to see, if I was a solo person, a well fleshed out solo version that was part of the game to begin with, so that I know that the grounding is solid. Now, let's talk about the add-ons, though, for a second. This is the Mages expansion. A lot of people are talking about this. This has the females, the mages instead of the female witchers, and everything that goes along with that. I'm not going to go into that too much, but also what I'm going to talk about here is price. And how I compare this to, as I've already mentioned, is CMON. CMON. Marvel United, for example, the most recent other big CMON campaign. Some of these little expansions for CMON with like 4 miniatures and, a couple cards and a bad guy, with the chibis. The cooperative version. I have a couple of the expansions from the first Kickstarter campaign, and honestly, it's a bad deal. But this expansions, whether it's this, it's CMON, it's Awakened Realms, it's any of these guys. Expansions are where you make the more money. It's where the cost effectiveness is not in favor of the consumers. It's not. And that's no slam on them. It's just the nature of the market, whether it's board games, whether it's video games, that is just consumerism. Let's talk about this one last expansion add-on that was just announced as well, and that is the Legendary Hunt add-on. And now this takes some of the concerns, some of the criticisms, and shapes them a little bit differently, because now you're going to be adding these legendary monster bosses, essentially, and that is adding another layer to it. And I guess my biggest concern would be that if you're playing, like, it says the example here that they use in the update is, a 3 trophy. But if you were doing a 4 or 5 trophy and then having to do this, that is a long game, folks, just based on my 3-4 game based trophy, sessions. What you're getting is these special 20 combat cards that are only used on the legendary monsters. Now, again, let me be clear. It's not 20 cards per monster. It's 20 cards total. That's a big difference. And you're also getting, obviously, just like the regular monsters, they all have a special ability. There's going to be unique abilities, and how they're going to be interacting is going to be present. And it's going to be present from the get-go, they said. And it's going to be traveling around the map. Now, again, with what I've seen with the base game, I'm not quite sure how this is going to work mechanically and what sort of influence or what sort of factors they're going to take. Is it going to be a la sort of Ragnarok with Blood Rage, where all of a sudden one of the areas is just taken out, or there's an area where the legendary monster is that you can't utilize that part of the map? Is there going to be something like that? What are we going to see? Because it doesn't go into any more specifics. It tells you a little bit of the lore and the mythos behind all 7 monsters, but not much else. It says very clearly it's going to leave destruction. There are going to be special tokens. But again, I've mentioned elsewhere, how much those clues matter for some of the other monsters. Sometimes when you are more powerful, you can get away with not going first in combat and not have it being too detrimental. Now, it's never great, but is this going to give some more ramifications to going after those clues for the legendary one as opposed to the regular levels? That would be the incentive there, I guess. And it says here also as well, gaining trophies is important as preparing for the last epic fight. Like how much preparation, what preparation? Because again, they don't talk about the preparation that's needed there. You can't add it with the Wild Hunt, but you can add it with all of the other expansions and the other modes from the Monster Trail in terms of the co-op or the solo. So again, it's good that it's cross-compatible. So it's not just competitive, you can use it in the co-op and the solo. If it was for one mode, I don't think you'd see as many people as interested in it as well. And this is probably the one that would be of the most important if you are definitely looking for a deeper, longer game as well. But again, I don't have hands-on mechanics, so I can't speak to how it's going to add or in what direction it's going to add as well. And let's be clear also, it's €35. And again, the one thing that stayed consistent with all this stuff is I think some of this stuff is just not going to be cheaper at retail. I don't think that's going to be like a lot of the other Kickstarter campaigns that I mentioned elsewhere, where that is more of the case rather than not, especially with the lack of exclusives. Now, the MSRP is $45 and they're selling it for $35. Plus or minus the shipping. It may be a wash, but I don't think you're going to be worse off if you get it now versus later either. And so they're giving you a ton of stuff in the base, and then they're putting icing on the cake, and that's where all the calories are in the first place in the cake, in the in general. And this is no different. There's the miniature coins. Again, I do nothing for coins. I don't think every Kickstarter campaign needs to have coins. And again, here is all the stuff that you are getting. This is a lot of stuff. These cards here, this adventure pack, again, adding to the variability. If your criticism is there's not enough stuff, this throws that out the window, in my opinion. If more stuff isn't a concern to you and the actual gameplay mechanics are, well, then you need to sit down and really hone in on whether or not you like moving around a map, trying to plan out your actions with cards, but then trying to balance the cards that you have for those actions, as well as whether or not you're going to use them to buy a card at the end of the round, and how that card at your end of your round may be less powerful, but maybe it allows you to chain things into that said battle that you're preparing for. How soon can you fight that monster because all of a sudden you've had 2 fatigue and you don't have the powerhouse of combo that you had before? Those are the things that if you like thinking like that, if you like that sort of strategic, tactical nature, you're going to like this. The biggest criticism I have just in general from a aesthetic standpoint now, was when I had those miniatures on the map, for example, with the 3 of us playing, and I always sort of chuckled at Simon going, they got those little plastic things and those color rings and you put them around the bases of the miniatures. Who needs those? These are all so different. Who's going to confuse them? Well, I'll be frank with you. On their first game, we confused each other's miniatures and we started moving around each other's miniatures because the height, the coloring, the general appearance of all of them are so similar, especially with some of the stature and the standing versus the sitting versus the, whatever. If we weren't paying very, 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 very close attention, we moved other people's miniatures and we had to rectify it afterwards. So I would like to see something like that because you see the color scheme right here. Give me a base to go along with that. Give me something to differentiate them on the map so I don't have that slight overhead because, again, it seems so slight, but all of a sudden your game is completely screwed up because someone moved the wrong miniature a turn or two ago and you can't rectify it. And that's a big thing with a small thing and it's easily solved, right? Right. The other concern I always have on this is, again, we're going to stay with the Simon theme. We're going to compare it to Simon, right? Low-hanging fruit. Blood Rage. Let's talk Blood Rage for a second. Why am I talking about Blood Rage? Because let's think of the Kickstarter exclusive monsters for Blood Rage. And the problem with the Kickstarter exclusive monsters for Blood Rage is that the argument is, although they're cool, although they're awesome, they're also broken. And the balance is completely off. And that is the other concern I have. When you're adding so many of these monsters, adding these special combat cards and these combat traits and the levels of monsters, are they all going to be balanced? Are you particularly going to go after a monster? Is it going to be sequentially that much harder between levels 1, levels 2, and levels 3? As soon as we fought a couple times, it became a race, less so to do everything, but more to make sure that you grabbed, one, at least if not 2 of those level 1 monsters, because that made a big difference early on. Of you not having to immediately fight a level 2 as your first battle, right? Going back for a second as well, with the Mages expansion, for example, adding the whole new deck system for the Mages thing, is it going to be well balanced with The Witcher? This is a lot of stuff. This is my biggest concern as I compared it earlier to Age of Atlantis. How can you manage to balance all of this stuff? And I'm not saying you can't, but is it going to get the proper testing? And what I mean by proper testing is like outside of go on board, outside of the initial designer circle, because that's really what you need oftentimes in these scenarios. That's why I give Oath a lot of credit from Leader Games, where they went and they tested and they tested and they tested and they used the market to their advantage so that the final product comes out and it's even better and people love it even more, which hypes it up even more, which makes even more people want to get it than we're trying it in the first place. And that's what you want out of a game like this, is that you want people to ooh and ah and not say, oh, well, you can't use these monsters, or you can't stay at this level monsters, or we have to house rule this. We've all seen the massive darknesses. We've all seen the Dark Souls that where, okay, well, if you house rule this, or if you modify this, or if you change this, well, I don't want to do that, right? I can, but that's not why I'm getting the game in the first place. So that would be my concern with all of these stretch goals, because this is truly a case of I worry about more is just too much. And that goes true whether it's the schools of the Witchers, the mages being thrown in, the monsters, the various monster levels, like I just said. That's a lot of stuff to have to work through. You saw how it was with Blood Rage with only just those 3. And again, the thing you want is you also, you want them to balance, but you want them to be different too. I don't want to fight the same monster with a different skin. That's my concern here. Those dice are pretty. Anyway. Bombs. Same thing with bombs. Like, it's adding another element, but do you need another element on top of the potions? Is it going to be just another thing where, like I said, and I described the potions earlier, where I didn't think they were much, but then they were. But now if I have 3 things like that I'm doing, that I'm managing, that I'm trying to accomplish, is that going to be just too much to manage on a sole basis where it becomes a little bit too, and I'm not going to say the word fiddly because I don't like that word, but is it just going to become too much overhead for me to feel like I've got control of everything and all the elements that I need? And some of you are going to go yes, and some of you are going to go, oh yeah, that's kind of a good point. Like, I don't really want to feel like I'm like that. I want to worry about my card management and my combo system rather than the 6 different types of cards that I have to choose from at every turn. And again, no, I think this is a great idea. But again, I don't know until it really hits the table, so the rubber meets the road in these situations. But I have to question it because there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. I mean, there's a reason that these campaigns and many campaigns put a limit on the stretch goals because they want what is coming out to be that much finely tested. And now I'm not saying that, again, that they're going to not do that in this case, but if you're going to finally test all of this stuff, if you're going to balance all of this stuff, if you're going to play all of this stuff, if you're going to integrate all of this stuff, you're going to need to take a lot more time to do it and to do it properly, which means, okay, are you okay with this not being June 2022 a year from now? Are you okay with this being June 2023, for example, if it means that the end product is that much better? Or would you rather have less stretch goals? Just a thought. Again, I don't know, but those are the kind of things that go through my head. Personally, I don't care when I get it. I just care that it is a good game, because a bad game is a bad game forever. A good game delayed is still a good game. And let me be clear. If my thoughts are not already clear on this to begin with, this is a very, when I got this, I received the copy from Alex from Board Game Co. And he sent me a message and he said, hey, hope you like it. This game I thought was solid. And I looked at that word and I said, what does that mean? And it's a word that it means something when you say it, but I can't necessarily give you an accurate description of what it is. But I would agree with Alex's assessment that this game is solid. If you like those things that I have described, if you like all of those elements, you will like this game. This is not a game that you have played with this combination of elements. Period. Something else that you should be aware of in this game is you can do, obviously, Witcher versus Witcher fighting. We did not do much, if at all, any Witcher versus Witcher fighting. And that is an element of this game that you have to be aware of, because it is drastically going to change the landscape. We were just more concerned about moving around, getting what we needed to do, and, finding the monsters quickly and getting the clues in order to be able to have that first turn, which we found out sometimes that first turn against the monster really didn't matter. So sometimes it was benefit, sometimes it was just a waste of time for us. So again, that is the depth of you trying to figure that puzzle out, but also the Witcher versus Witcher is drastically different, because then you have to worry about not only maneuvering around the monsters and trying to get to where you want to get to in the first place to get the attributes or the resources that you need, but you also have to worry about, is that guy going to attack me, because I've seen that they're bulking up on their cards and their combos, and they've all of a sudden kind of heading my way, and should I worry about that, or should I just worry about trying to do what I want to do in the first place? And if you don't want that head-to-head direct conflict, again, I mean, yes, you can avoid it. It's not going to be mandatory, but if somebody in your group decides to do that and you don't want to do that, there's not a whole lot that you can do to avoid it. And the other people can bet on it at the same time, so it's a double whammy. If you lose, other person bets on it and wins, it's sort of, you get SOL a little bit and the other two people get a bonus. Now, it's not huge by any means, but again, something to think about from that side of things. Are you okay with that element in a game like this, where it is not just parallel tracks of competitiveness? These tracks are intersecting and swerving and potentially can derail another person a little bit, in a sense, in order to benefit yourself or them. So let's scroll down here for a second. I got one other thing I want to talk about right now is, we talk about the mechanics and we talk about these elements, and, the deck building, I will say, the deck building is relatively minor, to be very frank. You're getting these cards off of the table and buying them, and you're trying to think of what other cards in your deck, but you really don't have a whole lot of, unless you're really good memory, which ones you've already got. And so the only time you're, again, like I said, is you're really having more than 3 cards in your hand, sometimes 4, is when you are drawing for combat. That's really the only time that the deck building plays a larger role, because oftentimes you can mitigate with those little symbols at the bottom left-hand corner of where you're going to go, and that matters a little bit less because the other symbols don't play as big a part during that phase of the game. So the deck building is not like your traditional deck building. If you are looking for a more traditional deck builder, again, this is not that. This is not going to appeal to you. You should avoid it because it is not that in that traditional sense. Now, they do an interesting thing, and I really like the mechanism always in all of these games that have this moving market where as things slide down, they become less, and as they are at the very other end, they are more. I like that economy style of buying in, deck building-esque card management style games. But again, some people don't. And the cost of how you're paying things is completely different, which again, I think is a fresh spin, but also it can be frustratingly irritating to other people at the same time. So again, those are the specific things that you need to look at to go, how do I feel about those things? So, I mean, that's the basic gist of things right now. I mean, this thing is going to end probably over 5 million, if not closer to 6 million by the time this campaign is done. By the time you are viewing this video, I would be shocked if it isn't at 5 million. But I think the ultimate question in a game like this is not, can you back it? You can back it. You can probably make money on it. You can probably flip it if you want to, especially at the deluxe level because of all of those expansions that are going to be included and because I'm not sure how easily, widely available it's going to be. That's not really a big question. But should you back it? And those are the elements and the things that you need to evaluate because this game is not going to be for everybody, as I led this discussion of the video to begin with. It's not. Having played it, I know people in my game group that would not like this. My wife would not like this game. And that's okay. But the point of this video is to make sure if this game is not for you, don't back it. Because I hate seeing games immediately go on the trade list once people get them because I didn't pay enough attention to it. I didn't listen enough. They didn't tell me enough to know whether or not it was for me. So that is the main point of this video. Should you back it? Is this right for you? And I hope this has been helpful. I mean, having this copy really was helpful for me. And again, to be honest, I'm split on it. I like it. I really like it. Am I in love with it? I don't know. As I said, I have no qualms about telling you this is a very solid game. This is not going to be a bad game. This is not one of those games where you wonder, is this going to be, half-baked? Is this going to be half put together? Are there going to be a lot of issues? No, this is a solid game already. Again, I just worry about is there too much over-the-top stuff still going on, trying to put too much icing and fondant on said cake that already has a pie baked in it as well? And is this game going to get played as a competitive head-to-head game versus the other games in my collection? And that is the biggest selling point for me. And it's definitely unique, but is it unique enough to make me want to play it again and again? And that is my biggest question right now. I don't know. Because I don't have unlimited funds. This one is going to go right down to the wire for me. And it's going to go right down to the wire of, am I going to continue to keep my pledge? And what pledge level am I going to get? Because again, as you heard me say, the deluxeifications are less important to me, but I think you're getting a great value, probably more so at the lower level because of the expansion stuff that's included, which makes it an even tougher selling point for me to go to the higher level. But I think if you like this game, you get it on Kickstarter, you don't wait because of the value. And I don't like necessarily always basing it off of value and cost, but I think in this case, it makes more sense as well. So there you go. Those are my thoughts. Those are my concerns. That's where my personal opinion is at. Is that useful? Is that helpful? I mean, let me know in the comment section below. If I can answer some questions, if you have questions about it specifically, I mean, I'm more than welcome. I mean, I'm not an expert. You're probably going to get better answers from the Kickstarter section or the Board Game Geek forums, but I will try my best as someone who's had hands-on experience with the game. So I appreciate you taking the time to watch this. I appreciate you taking the time to deal with my rants, my ramblings, and my discussion about this game as a whole. And we'll see where it ends up as a final project. All in all, though, I mean, it's pretty exciting either way. It's got a lot of eyes on it. Thanks for watching. Stay classy. Have a great day. See you around. And if you liked what I did, or were new to this channel and you kind of thought you could put up with me some more, I'd really appreciate another sub. But either way, have a great day.